I can imagine Hitchcock might have made it, and actually John Madden, while he was filming it, I think was making it like Hitchcock would have done, in the sense that he had the film completely edited in his mind.
Yes.
He knew the length of each shot, he knew the rhythm of each shot, he had it all knitted together, and it's a complicated jigsaw puzzle, filmically, to put together. My husband saw the film, and who's a filmmaker, and came out and said, that is masterful filmmaking. He didn't mention me, but he said that is masterful filmmaking, and I think he's true in the really true good old-fashioned sense of the word. Yes.
So you play a former Mossad agent, and an operation hasn't gone as well as we think. You've got quite an affinity with Israel, though, haven't you? Because you were a kibbutz girl way back when.
Well, yes. In the late 60s, I worked briefly on a kibbutz, but it was about 6 months after the Six-Day War.
Yeah.
And the kibbutz I was working on with my Jewish boyfriend at the time was just in the Golan Heights. The fields went up into the Golan Heights. So we were actually being shelled by the Jordanian army at the time, or the kibbutz was, I should say. So that was quite an adventurous kind of 2 weeks I spent there. My boyfriend had enough after 2 weeks. He couldn't stand the shelling, so he decided we'd hitchhike round Israel instead, which is what we did. And
you re-immersed yourself a bit in sort of Israeli life and culture, the Simon Wiesenthal story and all the rest of it to make this film, I think.
I couldn't just approach this without taking on board really that psychological burden of the Holocaust on Israeli people, especially Israeli people of a certain age. Yeah.
You've said recently that you talked about cocaine and Klaus Barbie.
Oh, don't. Oh, God, here we go again.
Sorry.
I'll get such awful emails and, God.
But there is a very interesting argument, isn't it?
Yes.
That actually, the thing about cocaine is not necessarily the individual choice, it's the industry that's the deadly thing.
Absolutely. And you have to think, remember, yeah, you're having a lovely time, great party, cool, lovely, oh, I love this. Your money that you paid for those drugs is going to this destructive, cruel, brutalizing of cultures, of people, of farmers. So make that connection. Don't do it for yourself. Do it for other people, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, because Klaus Barbie is said to have made money out of the cocaine industry. And, of course, these days, lots of sort of modern psychopaths of one kind or another are still making money out of it.
Look at what's happening in Mexico.
Yeah,
you know that. So I think a lot of when you're young, you don't think of that. You are selfish and self-centered, and you just want to have a good time and and
people are prepared to boycott sort of oranges and stuff, but they don't think about boycotting this in the same way.
That's a good word to use. Boycott. Let's boycott hard drugs.
Tell us about the film that you've just been engaged in making, which I don't think has got a title yet, but is about Phil Spector and that extraordinary trial. And you're
first trial.
You're playing Phil Spector's lawyer,
defence lawyer,
and Al Pacino with an incredible wig is playing
well,
Phil
you have
Spector.
To wear the wig, don't you?
Yeah.
Actually, my wig's pretty incredible too, because with the lawyer, I had this sort of enormous amount of blonde hair. So my wig's in competition with Al's, definitely.
So this is the man who created the Wall of Sound. He's still in prison for murder at the moment.
Yes,
second-degree murder.
Yes.
And what was it that attracted you? I mean, apart from the fact that Al Pacino, David Mamet, I think, did the screenplay.
That's it, really. I mean, that's it. There it is.
Yeah.
It's obviously a leading role, but Bette Midler originally was playing the role. Actually, I have to say, much better casting for it. She looks much more like the woman Linda Kenny Barton, and her where she comes from culturally is much closer than where I come from. But she had a very bad disc, slipped disc, so she tried to complete it but couldn't. Yeah. So they were in desperation. They called me up, and I sort of stepped in at the very last minute. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's been controversial already before it's been seen, hasn't it?
I think that there's a group of people, and absolutely I had full sympathy with them. Lana Clarkson, who was the girl who was murdered, woman who was murdered, I say murdered, killed. You're absolutely right, because it is, you know, who knows what happened. And everyone who I've spoken to, I know a very good criminal journalist who goes to see all the big, called Linda Deutsch. She's a very famous American. She says of all the trials she's witnessed and sat through, OJ, all of them, she said that trial was the one that was the most disturbing. She said because you just didn't know what had happened. You just, all the evidence contradicts each other, nothing is clear. It's just, she said that one was very, very disturbing.
And Spectre sitting like a spectre. Spectre the Spectre.
Sitting like this.
In the middle of it all.
In the middle of it all.
So those people who say, oh, it's going to glamorise him, can you reassure them that's not what it's going to happen?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think so. I mean, he's an extraordinary, deeply complicated, probably, he said himself, I think I'm insane, you know, person. You have an actor as brilliant as Al playing him, no holds barred. You know, so I'm not saying it glamorises him, but you can't avoid the sort of, not spectacular, I can't think of the right word.
The power of the man.
Yeah, the sort of fascination of that kind of personality. You can't avoid it. The eccentricity of it, the extremeness of it, you know, you can't avoid that. But
and we're not called upon to boycott his music, anyway.
Well, you know, if you feel you want to. But Lana Clarkson was obviously a very sweet person, you know, very beloved. I read quite a lot about her before I did the piece, and I got the impression that she was a truly lovely, good-hearted woman. So I can understand people not wanting, you know, her name to be sullied, and I hope that we don't.
You've been working. You've been over in the States a lot of the time, but any reflections on Britain over the summer? Because it's been a strange old summer, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. I mean, I witnessed the riots from a distance. I wasn't here, although they took place. You know, I have so many friends who live in the Clapham area, so that was something sort of quite extraordinary to witness from a distance. But I think we can only really understand why that happened with the distance of time. I think in 4 or 5 years, as with the Brixton riots, as with the LA riots, you get a bit of a time distance, and you start seeing it in the context of an era, a time in Britain, things that were happening all around, and you start sort of beginning to understand it.
It's a funny one. We've had all the phone hacking and so on. There has been a sort of sense that maybe we're not quite such a cuddly and pleasant country as we thought we were.
No,
but
Grimsville. The Americans now calling us Grimsville.
Yeah, yes.
Not very nice. But you know, Britain's always had that. It's always had a dark side.
Jane Tennyson always knew that.
Jane Tennyson always knew that. But, you know, I look at our history of football hooliganism, you know, and the violence associated with that. You know, I went to endless American football games where the feelings run incredibly high, you know, the incredible loyalty to your team and commitment. You never saw a single fight, you know, and the history forever, as far as I can understand, certainly since the 60s, maybe beyond that, before that, of, you know, violence, serious violence at football games. You know, I've always said the British are savages. It's what makes us good at wars. And it, you know, there's a good side to it. We're an island people, and we've been fighting for our little island's existence for thousands of years, and I do believe you know, the old Britain with his woad, you know, and Britannia,
still there
and
somewhere.
Boadicea, you know, and that sort of, you know, that kind of bolshy, you know, I'll take you on kind of attitude works great in a war. You know, it's fantastic. When there's no war and it's peacetime, you know, you have to find a way of
Boadicea would be
maybe football is a good way to go and watch a football match.
Yeah. What about the classics? And I'm thinking of that wonderful role that you did as Prospera, the female Prospero,
Yes.
some way back. Are there sort of big Shakespearean roles you'd like to take on, either in film or indeed on the old boards?
I think the only one that you could do, I mean, apart from all the female roles, you know, but the trouble is you sort of run out of female roles as you get older in Shakespeare as well as everything else. You know, the female roles you could legitimately assail are not that great. You know, Volumnia's,
Yeah.
you know.
Coriolanus is always a bit of a...
Lady M is not fabulous.
No.
So they're not great roles. Queen Margaret, you know, and the Henrys. But, you know, there's not a lot to do. So, you know, you have to start purloining the male roles. The Tempest, I felt, the Prospero, you could do the play as it's written, apart from a little bit of the backstory, but absolutely as it's written. You don't have to change anything for the play to work as a woman. I think, actually, it works better, a woman playing the role, I have to say. Shakespeare's era, it was women who were the witches, you know, who were being burnt at the stake. So one of the major speeches in the role is a woman's speech, is Medea's speech, that Shakespeare has completely plagiarized. So I think there's an argument to be made that if he was writing the modern day, he would have written it for a woman.
Well, that would be great. That'd be a fascinating one. And I mean, you've said in the past that it does get harder when you're in your prime to get these great roles, but actually. I mean, in Hollywood, you've got more and more good roles.
No, absolutely.
You know, it hasn't done badly for you.
My career, you know, I worked all through my 20s and 30s. I worked constantly. But in terms of sort of being, well, you know, being recognised and getting the sort of the big, well-paid roles, that didn't happen to my 40s, actually.
Yeah. And you think Hollywood's a bit obsessed still with the young bucks at the moment? Is that
well? Hollywood will, you know. I mean, forget Hollywood. The film industry.
The film industry, we should say,
is always going to love youth and beauty, and so it should. You know, it should. And that's absolutely legitimate and you know, a part of the process. It's like sportsmen, really. You know, I mean. Sportsmen have to retire at the age of 30. Athletes do, ballet dancers do. You know, in a way, it's kind of built into the into the culture, really.
You're part of a group of women who've carried on getting great roles. Nonetheless, it's you know. It's
yes, I'm incredibly lucky. Incredibly lucky. When I think that Gloria Swanson in Sunset Boulevard, I think was in her early 40s, having to. You know, I'm playing a great role, but a role that was basically saying, "I'm over it. I will never be a star again. I'm old, and and you know, I'm mad to imagine that Cecil B. DeMille would actually want me in his movie. You know, I'm nuts."
It's quite a thought, actually.
Yes, and now you know that would be completely acceptable to be in your early 40s. A lot of the big female stars are. You know, Angelina Jolie.
Angelina Jolie.
You know, Jennifer Aniston's getting. You know, so they're big stars. And, it's absolutely acceptable.
Dame Helen, in your early 40s, still doing pretty well.
I
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.